should we talk about the whole plane crash and Trump?
Yeah. So I don't know what you've heard. So the question you're posing is, or I guess, excuse me, the article is, or Trump is posing is, did DEI cause this? My understanding is that lobbyists caused this. Is that your take as well?
In my preliminary reading of this, it's that he actually like made decisions to understaff certain bodies like within the FAA. And I don't know if that was like
Oh,
if that directly led to what happened. Like I think there were it's always with these crashes, there's so many theories, and it could
yeah,
be none of them, it could be one of them, it could be a couple at once that like all came together in this perfect
yeah,
storm and led to the crash. But I remember because I worked with Boeing whistleblowers, and
yep.
this was
Scary.
before, yeah, this was before I talked to, the family members of the second guy who died very suspiciously of MRSA.
Yeah,
Um, Yeah. And they Boeing for the longest time and even governmental authorities were like, "Oh, it was a bird strike or it was a software issue." It wasn't. It was a mechanical issue. And so there's so many theories that are thrown around during these sorts of crashes. But what I read and what I do think is, probably some sort of contributor to things is that if he's understaffing. Yes, the government is bloated in some ways, but I definitely want the FAA potentially of all of the departments to be overstaffed in some ways. If it's,
yeah,
I mean, maybe not overstaffed, but we imagine that we get on a flight and it's not like a 50-50 chance that we crash or even like 80-20. Like
sure.
we
Yeah,
think a 100% chance or 99.9999% chance that we survive that flight. And so I think that, and it also just concerns me so much that he's like, yep, DEI did it. And Musk said the same thing about the fires. He's like, the
yeah.
lesbian fire department. Like,
Same.
what are you saying? Like
It doesn't even make sense. So like, there's like this kernel of truth that they're trying to like work here. So there is a lot of litigation about like the physical fitness requirements for female firefighters and like
mhm,
should those be different than the male firefighters, and like
right.
counterpoint, there's a whole bunch of overweight firefighters who get skated on by who just happen to be male, so like it's all kind of iffy, the whole thing. But like that's a kernel of truth, whereas the reality is the female firefighters are very effective. You're having trouble hiring enough firefighters, so the DEI is not really the issue. It's the same reason we're going to roll out female frontline combat troops any day
Mhm.
now, because like we can't get enough soldiers right now. So like it's gonna happen, and like it's not gonna cause us to lose wars. Like it's clearly they're not inferior soldiers, they're not inferior firefighters. Um, but the idea of this DEI is insane. Like my understanding from my research is lobbyists asked for more routes to be opened, like more flight paths to be opened
Mhm.
around this airport. They were successful. The flight paths were open. Both the helicopter and the plane were in their designated flight path, and there was a collision.
Yeah.
Can't guarantee, I don't have firsthand knowledge of this, but this is what
Right.
I've been told. And it just sounds like lobbyists got a little too powerful. I don't
Mhm.
know if this is true, but like it's certainly not that we included some protected class in a job. Like that doesn't even make sense. Like, well, how does that? Oh, there's a. I don't know.
Well,
I'm trying to think of like.
he was saying that he believes that people with like intellectual disabilities were he's like they're not smart enough and like you need someone who's like a brilliant chess player who gets the soft or he was just spouting off and then I saw some NPR headline that was like in people with intellectual disabilities are employed for a variety of jobs. Air traffic controllers are not one of them. Like it's just not
Yeah,
it's
the
part
accommodations,
yeah.
they run on a reasonability standard, right? So like if you're an air traffic controller and you need an accommodation for like ADHD, right? Like
Yeah.
even that like the accommodation is you need a break or like you need to slow things down. Like that's a common ADHD. I need to slow things down. I need a pause to be able to think. I need to
Mhm.
not have too much pressure on me. Like these are common things for certain folks with ADHD that you'll see as accommodations. None of those would be reasonable for an air traffic controller
Yeah. No.
because the whole thing is stress and immediacy. Like
Yeah.
right now, or people die.
Yeah.
That's the gig. There's no like
Yeah.
you,
No.
we can get you a seat if you need accommodation because you can't stand for that long. Like it, but
Mhm.
it's not like,
Yep.
and it's just a job that you may not be well suited for. And
Yep.
the way the law operates is, hey, that's not reasonable. People will die, or we have to hire a whole other person to do the job because you actually can't do it. Like
Can't do
it's not reasonable. So that theory is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make sense.
Oh man, yeah, he's been spouting off some wild stuff. He did you hear he was talking about government waste and he was like, "We've sent $50 million worth of condoms to Hamas." Like, and like, I mean, I haven't actually like people are like, "Did we?" Um,
I
but
don't know.
it's just the thing you have to, and he says things in such a way that it's kind of like the Hitler salute that Elon Musk did, where it's like he was like, "Oh no, I was saying I give my heart to you." And then, Trump would say, "Oh no, of course, I want people of color to be air traffic controllers." But then he's blaming, like he's using coded language, like DEI is still, or like we need it's let's blame it on DEI. DEI is now DIE, is now die because people are dying under DEI. And it's like that is so it's such a clever way of like the language is clever because it's not
Yeah,
overtly like what we see as um, racist or whatever.
it is. I mean, I guess this brings us to, have we touched, are we planning to touch on the new director of the EEOC being put in place?
Oh, we can talk about that.
So I'm doing a long form video on this right now. Um, Interesting. She's like a J.K. Rowling. I mean, I allegedly from my readings about her, she's like, is it turf feminist?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So like unexpected that Trump would put a radical feminist of any stripe in that
right.
role, but she appears to rabidly hate trans rights, which is horrific. Um, but it's a very strange choice because she's
Mhm.
not.
She's not as bad as we thought she might be, or is
Well,
like,
she's horrific. She's like I think she's a bad person, but like just to be clear, but like she's not inactive. Like
yeah, yeah.
she will do things, I think, pretty aggressively for
Mm,
women's rights and some other protected classes. Um, and listen, there's this. She removed all the pronouns, like the ability to put pronouns in Outlook from the EOC ability, and like I've always had a kind of a differing view on the pronouns thing because there's a lot of people who don't want to be forced to share their pronouns,
mm,
who have non-standard pronouns, and like that's a choice. And if you're like everybody has to put their pronouns in, you're outing people, and that's like
right.
not actually good in a lot of ways. Like we deal with a lot of there's a lot of white knight like
Mhm.
millennial white guys who are like starting fist fights because somebody won't put their pronouns in. And it's like, my guy, you are the problem. Like that person,
That person just
however
wants
they
to, yeah.
identified via gender, like they didn't want to. It's
Yeah.
not their job to tell. Like they'll let you know what they want to, how they want to be referred to, but like enough already. You know? Did I lose you?
No, I'm here.
You're
Can you
back.
hear me?
Okay, your
Yeah.
video froze, but that's okay.
Okay. The White Knight, yeah, it's there. I feel like there have been so many White Knights in the last couple of years that have been so like they think that they're allies and like they are in a sense, but there's also this like level of tone deafness and that it's more about like the ego of being an ally than like actually like knowing what the person is needing in that situation, which is like, and I know
Yeah,
so many people who are like, I talked to a guy the other day who's gay and he's like, I don't talk about it in the workplace. Like I don't, and that's like their decision. And that must be a hard decision to have to make as someone who, feels like they can't be their full self. But some people don't want to be their full selves. They just want to like go in, do the job, and leave.
I have an incredibly famous criminal attorney who's a good buddy of mine who's not out, and his take is just like, yeah, it's not part of my practice. Like
Yeah,
I don't want to share, you know,
yeah,
and I'm sure he might think that he's dealing with a lot of hardcore criminals who might have their own thoughts on his sexuality, and maybe it's just not good for his business, or maybe he just doesn't want to talk about it. I don't know, but like he's not out, and that's his prerogative. Like that. We can't run around and be like, you must be out for the good of your protected class. I
Yeah.
hate the white knights wielding someone else's protected class and someone else's rights as a sword. Like
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
someone asks you to be an ally and gives you an ask, do it.
Yep.
Yes. But you running around being like, hey, you need to put your pronouns in your email. Slow down.
Yeah.
That's just using someone else's rights and suffering as a weapon to like bully
Totally.
others, and like you're not involved. Don't insert yourself
Mhm.
until asked is my take. I mean,
Yeah.
I say as somebody who runs around suing people, but
I agree with you. I mean, it just feels like it's more about the other person's ego and like wanting to feel needed and like a savior than
yeah.
what anyone actually needs. And then just also making so many assumptions that could be totally inaccurate. And it's like, well, ask someone a question before you I just think in general, people don't ask each other enough questions and then they just make these assumptions and act on them. And if we all were just more curious about each other, I think it would be a lot more easy to interact. But that's like a simplistic way of putting things, I guess. But
And people are so much more caring in a one-to-one interaction.
definitely, definitely.
And so like if you're talking like about statistics, people can be super hateful.
Yeah.
What's the Stalin quote? Like, one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic.
Yeah.
And it's just like the same thing. I mean, it happened. We see it in the media all the time. Like people are like, yeah, screw those migrants. And then like, but not my friend Steve, like
Yeah. Not like my cleaner Maria. Like it's,
yeah, she's
yeah.
great. Like, I don't know.
Well, it's interesting. My boyfriend is out visiting his mom, who is very she watches Fox News
Oh boy.
pretty much 24/7. And I told him yesterday about the whole DEI, what Trump said about DEI being the cause of the plane crash. And this morning his mom like put on Fox and he's like, I can't he usually just he's like, whatever, I'll just let her have her thing. But he's like, I can't watch this. I'm sorry. And she's like, why? And he's like, well, Trump is like blaming DEI on this plane crash, and I just think I can't hear it. It's I need to just you can have your opinions about it, mom, but I have to turn it off. And I think it's so
Hateful.
wrong that like he would be basically saying that, people of color or women or people with different brains, which we just talked about isn't the case, caused this. And like she goes, huh, you're right, that's not nice at all. So like when he explained
Oh,
it to her, she was like,
growth.
yeah,
Growth.
she was like she like didn't, but then so he's like, does she even understand what she's like consuming? Is she just hearing this stuff and like feels like she has a relationship with these hosts because, she's older and just watching it by herself? And like, is it like what, because when I just break it down for her, she doesn't actually seem to agree with what is being said. And I found that so interesting.
I think that's true. I know a climate change denier, big
Yeah.
Fox News guy, who was like going to buy property in Florida for taxes, obviously, and was like straight up like, well, I wouldn't buy waterfront. I mean, the water level is going to rise. And I was like, wait, hold on, buddy. Hold. Why is the water level going to rise? He's like, sea level's going up, buddy. I was like, but you say it's not. Like, what? And he's
Yeah.
like, well, come on. It's a
Yeah.
floodplain. It's a floodplain. I'm like, but why is it a floodplain? Like, what? It's like when there's money on the line,
Right. Right.
well, there's a storm surge. There's a storm surge. It's just not safe. And it's like, I know you want waterfront property. I know what you want, but you're not going to buy it because in the next 50 years it's going to be worth $0 and you're not going to be able to insure it. So like, it's interesting that you espouse the talking points of Fox News until somebody wants you to put
Well, yes.
2.5 down on a house,
Mhm.
and then you're like, I don't
Mhm.
know. I mean, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
think people buy into a lot of the stuff they espouse.
No, I think you're so right. And then it becomes clear when it's like directly affecting them, what they actually believe.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
100%. Did we hit all the stories?
I think we did.
Same time next week?
Yes.
All
Let's
right,
do it.
everybody. Like, subscribe, comment down below, share our channel so it can grow. Please check Ari's links down below. Her content on TikTok is fantastic. Also, her LinkedIn content is really, really good. And your employer will not be able to see that you're friends with her. I promise.
Thanks, Vince.
Take care, everybody.
Next week.